Hello, I'm Perrin, President and CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to the Business of Business. Throughout the pandemic, I'll be having a series of conversations with experts, including government officials, business leaders, and a variety of others about COVID-19 and its effects on the Canadian economy. There are many ways in which this pandemic stands out in comparison to anything else we've seen in our lifetimes. Two of them are, first, the element of surprise. The COVID-19 struck the world with a speed and force that we simply could not have anticipated. But the second and much more encouraging development is the speed with which the scientific community responded, developing vaccines and therapeutics at a pace that was simply unprecedented. For all the terrible losses inflicted by COVID-19, we can count our blessings that advances in medical science have avoided something that could have been so much worse. Now, my guest today is well qualified to talk about some of those advances. Faris El Refaie became president and general manager of GlaxoSmithKline Canada in August 2020. He's responsible for all pharmaceutical operations for GSK here in Canada. He currently sits on the country management board representing the pharma business and is a prominent member of the pharma leadership team. He joined GSK after spending the previous 20 plus years at AstraZeneca and recently returned to Canada from the UK. Well, Faris, welcome. It would have been hard for you to assume your responsibilities at a more challenging time than you chose.
Oh, thanks for welcoming me, Perrin. It's a pleasure to be here.
I mentioned earlier the speed and the force with which the pandemic struck. How did the biopharmaceutical sector respond when COVID-19 took the world by surprise?
That's a good question. I think the innovative biopharmaceutical sector responded immediately. They developed and delivered a number of transformative innovations. First, rapid diagnostic testing. Second, as you mentioned in the intro, the multiple vaccines that have had a massive impact on population health in recent months. And we at GSK have been collaborating with other manufacturers to develop a COVID-19 vaccine, bringing our innovative pandemic adjuvant to those collaborations. And the adjuvant AS03, and I'm proud to say that our St. Foy, Quebec facility is part of the manufacturing solution for AS03. And then third, which is maybe less well known, Perrin, is new advances in treatments using monoclonal antibodies or mAbs to treat the high-risk population of people that have already been infected with COVID-19. So hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about that a little bit too.
Well, tell me a bit about that. How does this represent something that is unique and new? And how is the industry able to move ahead in this area so rapidly?
Well, I think when you have something like the pandemic, which just impacted us all, right? It impacted us personally, it impacted us from a professional standpoint as well in our businesses. It was a moment in time where everyone had to get together and work together to develop solutions as quickly as possible. And you saw those collaborations across the world. And we were part of those collaborations. When you think about some of the innovations we're trying to make on the vaccine space, we have collaborations with Sanofi, a leading vaccine manufacturer. We have collaborations with Medicago, a Canadian-based organization. But we also looked outside our own borders and looked to the new biotech organizations that were innovating in this area. And that's where we started to see some additional innovations come to life. For example, for our therapeutic that we're bringing to market, it's a collaboration with GSK and Vir Biotechnology. And that's one, again, if you look at the time that it actually took for these molecules to be developed and to be tested in a rigorous way, it's really remarkable to see how when people work together in a very dedicated and urgent way, you can actually bring medicines to market fast. And you know, it also goes to say that the government of Canada is also willing to step up in this area too. If I think of what Health Canada did, developing their interim order, which essentially was a way to fast track authorizations for anything related to the pandemic. I think we've all tried to step up and address this global concern as quickly as possible.
There has been an extraordinary attempt both by government and by the private sector and by science as well to accelerate the pace of development and implementation of solutions. And that has been something that really has stood out during this pandemic. If in terms of the development and approval of these therapeutics, How would that have compared, say, 10 years ago?
Well, it's not even 10 years ago, Perrin. I think it's just a couple of years ago. But I think you've just seen a much more accelerated pathway. I think there's been all across the development of a molecule, from clinical trial protocol design to finding sites, to entering patients and enrolling them, working with the sites to get them activated. I think you've seen acceleration all the way across. The time it takes to analyze the results, the time working with the Health Canada for approvals has just shrunk. So it's hard to imagine what we would have been if we would have kept the same timelines 10 years ago. But we're very fortunate we all came together to at least be in the situation we are today, where you've got rapid diagnostic tests, as an example, that have enabled society to reopen businesses and then our borders, when you think about it, by accurately and quickly identifying those who have COVID-19 and be able to contact trace them and really minimize the exposure to family and friends and coworkers, et cetera. When you think of the vaccines that we've been able to bring to market so far, I mean, in Canada alone, I think we've had over 50 million people, or 50 million vaccines. Over 84% at last count of people 12 years and up have been at least partially vaccinated. And I think we're over 3/4 when it comes to people in that age bracket that have been fully vaccinated. So when you think about what we've been able to do in such a short amount of time, it's quite impressive to see. And then, like I said at the end, COVID-19, I think, is going to be something it's not going to disappear. And we have to learn, to some extent, how to live with this thing. And that's why we need therapeutics that can actively treat patients who ultimately get COVID-19. And we've seen, at least with some of the breakthrough medicines, and there's been 3 approved by Health Canada right now, that we have some solutions to offer to patients. So across the board, from identifying them, from giving them vaccines, to actually bringing therapeutics to life, I think the innovative biopharmaceutical sector has done a pretty remarkable job so far.
Faris, you've put your finger on one of the great lessons for us, I suppose, that we've learned in the last year. We'd hoped, when we were hearing about the development of vaccines at this time last year, that we could somehow eradicate the disease. But I think what you're pointing to is that this may in time become endemic. It may become something where we're focused on risk management, as opposed to assuming that there can be zero risk by eliminating the disease altogether. And that means then that suddenly therapeutics play an even more important role.
Yeah, even with the advances we've made in the diagnostic space and the advances we made with vaccines, we're definitely on the path to recovery. And we're seeing the country opening up, but there's still some major challenges that are going to face us. We're going to see multiple variants of the virus that are different from the first one that was first detected. We've got the Delta variant that's going across Canada now, and in some areas creating a wave 4. The Delta variant's proven to be much easier to spread and quite frankly harder to prevent than some of the previous versions of COVID-19. And in addition, we still have a large patient population, children under the age of 12, that are still unable to receive vaccination from the present time, at least. And there's studies going on with children with a number of the vaccines. And then finally, you've got, unfortunately, many Canadians remain skeptical about the benefits of COVID vaccines and have so far opted out of immunization. We're also starting to see some breakthrough infections amongst those who are actually fully vaccinated. So taken together, the ongoing threat of COVID-19 is having a huge impact on our healthcare systems, especially the hospitals, the clinics, working so hard to address and reduce not only the COVID-19 cases, but the staggering backlog now of surgeries and other treatments. So this is going to be something that we're going to have to find ways to live with. And one of the answers that we have in place is with therapeutics, is finding ways that we can actively treat people with medicines and leverage some of the advances in science here in Canada. And one of those advances, so maybe let me give a little bit, is is these monoclonal antibodies or mAbs. And these treatments, at least if you follow what the studies, the phase 3 studies have shown, is that when used appropriately, they can help keep the most at-risk populations with mild to moderate symptoms from ending up in the hospitals or unfortunately dying. Monoclonal antibodies are lab-made proteins that mimic the immune system's ability to fight off harmful pathogens such as coronaviruses. They can reduce the risk of hospitalization and death if initiated in the early stages of the disease. Health Canada, as I mentioned, has authorized 3 of them already to treat COVID-19. And sotrovimab, which is the one that was developed by GSK and Vir Biotechnology, is a monoclonal antibody that we've received Health Canada approval in July of this year. And sotrovimab is specifically designed to prevent the virus from entering human cells. And we studied this in a large randomized placebo-controlled study and really confirmed that if you use sotrovimab in early stages of the disease, it results in a 79% relative risk reduction in all-cause hospitalizations or deaths.
79%.
79%. And I'm also proud to say, Perrin, that we had Canadian investigators and Canadian patients that were part of that sotrovimab study.
That's extraordinary to be looking at a figure like that. And what we're talking about then is a significant reduction in terms of costs to the public, in terms of medical costs. We're talking about reduced lives lost, less serious impacts on the long-term health of Canadians, and less of a concern in terms of glutting up the healthcare system as well.
Exactly.
So it's an extraordinary breakthrough. And tell us about the application of these technologies for other diseases other than COVID-19.
I think, yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, I think this pandemic, while it's accelerated solutions for COVID-19, it's also proven that certain platforms can work across other disease areas. We've seen that with the vaccines. mRNA technology is one that now is being investigated for other disease areas as well. We have an ongoing collaboration with Vir Biotechnology based on some of the early results. We've also looked into other areas, and we've got, I think, 5 active collaborations underway, trying to find other solutions to other disease areas and bring those to life as well. So on a positive side, this pandemic, and there's not too many things you can say on the positive side, but maybe one of the positive things is that it has unlocked maybe and accelerated some of the development into these platforms that could recognize solutions to come.
And in terms of the application of these technologies, they would be after a person is symptomatic or after a person's been diagnosed, as opposed to having it as a prophylactic.
Yeah, currently those are the ones that have been approved. It's after a person has been diagnosed with COVID-19, and if you're a high-risk person, it's getting treated early enough with a goal of preventing that hospitalization, right, and preventing death. If you look at the study, and that's where we saw a lot of the issues with COVID-19. Is patients were entered into the hospital, the hospitals and the ICUs became overrun, and that's where the challenges persist, even in areas like Alberta today.
One of the areas in which we've made some progress is in the collaboration between government and the pharmaceutical sector in Canada. What do we need to do at this point to be able to advance beyond where we are?
You know, one of the things, and we have spoken to some folks in the government sector about this very point. We've learned a lot about what we can do when we partner together, how we can accelerate timelines, how we can advance the science and bring it to Canadians in a very effective way. We can't lose that after we get out of this pandemic world. We have to be able to translate those learnings to other products, for other disease areas, for cancer, for HIV medicines, where when patients need the medicines and they need the innovations, they can get them quite effectively. And I think we've got a bit of space that we can, a bit of gap that we need to close here in Canada relative to some of the other markets in the world.
One of the points that the Canadian Chamber has been trying to make to politicians from all backgrounds is that after this is over, after we get to closer to whatever the new normal is, we need to step back and do an analysis of what are the lessons learned from the pandemic. How do we prepare for the next one? Can you share some of your thoughts in terms of what it is that we need to do as a country at this point to be better prepared for when the next pandemic or when the next crisis of this nature strikes?
Yeah, that's a great question, Perrin, and it's so timely given that we're in the middle of a federal election right now. And I must say I've been watching all of the parties' platforms, and it's quite encouraging to see all of the parties focus more on the important role of life science and domestic manufacturing. And it's reassuring to see that they understand how this prepares us for a future health crisis. You know, we at GSK are very committed to manufacturing in Canada. For example, our flu vaccine manufacturing facility in Quebec continues to play a pivotal role for the health of Canadians, particularly as we approach flu season. It would be great, to answer your question, to see the new federal government, whoever it is, publishing new life sciences strategies for Canada as one of its first tasks. It would serve them well to publicly acknowledge that regulation and public policy play a vital role when it comes to be able to attract global manufacturing investments. And the pandemic has proven how important this is. We must always be at the forefront. We have to be one step ahead of the next pandemic or the next health crisis and invest in the current generation of technology, vaccines, testing, and therapeutics. And we can't rest assured that we will fight off this virus or the next one and then be done. So we always have to keep one eye on the future, keep attracting new investments so that we're prepared to keep Canadians healthy, hospitals under capacity, and ultimately our businesses open.
Faris, can I ask you about your role at GSK as well? When talking to CEOs from across the country, I've yet to find one of them who has said that the company is going to look the same after COVID as it did before. They've organized the companies in different ways. They've organized their workforces differently. They have developed different business strategies. How has GSK Canada been affected by the pandemic, and how has it changed your business strategy?
As far as our business strategy, that hasn't changed, but it has changed how we operate and how we bring it to life in Canada. We've had to put new policies, new processes in place, right off the bat. You know, our number one goal when the pandemic hit was to protect our employees, right? Keep them home until we understand what's happening. But we still wanted to enable them to do their jobs effectively. So we all had to learn how to operate in this virtual world, not just internally within our head office, but also externally with our customers. And that caused us to go on a capability build across our organization to leverage these technologies and put them to life. In addition, we've also had to, I'd say, find a way to recognize our business goals. Now, we at GSK have a wide range of products across multiple platforms in oncology and respiratory medicine, in the vaccine space, many specialty care products. We've had to find a way to keep that operating while at the same time contributing to this major global challenge that was upon us. And for us, that's multiple collaborations in the vaccine space and also launching new products that weren't there before the pandemic. We had to flex our agility muscle and make sure that we could bring these products to Canadian patients as quickly as possible. So it has, like I said, not necessarily changed our overall business strategy, but it has caused us to work in a much more agile, much more flexible, and much more virtual way than we ever thought we were going to in the past.
And that's certainly a lesson that I have heard repeated time after time by CEOs across the country, that has taught us the need for greater agility, the need for greater innovation, and the need to reimagine how our business models are going to function as a consequence in the future. Tell us about the issue of skills. One of the concerns that I hear when I talk to CEOs across the board is the challenge that they have in terms of finding people with the skills that are necessary to be able to grow their businesses in the way in which they would like to do it. In the health sciences sector, are we doing enough in Canada to produce people with the necessary skills, or is this an area where we need to do much more?
That's a great question. The short answer to the question would be yes. And that's if I reflect, and then I'll give you the proof point I have for this. At GSK, we've got hundreds of employees across Canada, thousands if you include all of our manufacturing facilities. And I have to say, one of the things I'm most proud of at GSK Canada is the number of employees that have been promoted into global roles or into larger US roles, where the global organization recognizes some of the skills and capabilities that we have and that we develop here in Canada. And I think part of that is what we try and do in Canada is stay close to customers, keep an external lens, and using that agility muscle and leveraging innovation, make sure that we're evolving with the times. We're not trying to use old technologies to reach customers in this new world that we're in. So it's a challenge. We learn, we fail, we learn. But I think we're doing a good enough job, at least internally, to be recognized. And that's why I mentioned the proof point is the pride I see when they ask our Canadian employees to apply for some of these global roles.
You were mentioning the challenges in terms of experimenting, failing, trying again. I think many Canadians aren't aware of, for the innovative sector in pharmaceuticals, the amount of investment that needs to be made at the front end to bring an innovative new pharmaceutical on stream. Can you give us more of a sense of what is required there and how risky this can be for a pharmaceutical company?
I think it's you can read many stats that show the cost of bringing, even one product to successful approval. The costs are immense, and the risks that are taken by pharmaceutical companies are quite high. And it becomes difficult and more challenging for us to operate when at the end of the day, it still takes hurdles to get government to recognize the value of the medicines and to put into place pricing and access for patients. And then oftentimes we're limited as well relative to some of the other countries in the world with the patents we have here in Canada. So it does become a challenge for us to remain competitive in Canada relative to some of the other countries in the world. Now, one of the things that we see at GSK, and I'm sure other pharmaceutical companies have done this, is they're trying to reduce the risk in the pipeline. They're trying to leverage genetic testing and other diagnostic capabilities early in drug development and patient selection for clinical studies, so that the results can hopefully show in a less risky way that you can design a molecule, you can treat patients with it, and actually you can see the desired effect. So over time, you'll start to see more and more of these diagnostic and genetic capabilities built into pharmaceutical products in order to minimize the risk and the cost it takes to develop studies. Then the other thing I would say, and we're doing this quite a lot at GSK, is look outside our own walls and start to partner with some of the top leading academic centers and some of the top leading biotechnology companies as well, to identify areas where we can collaborate on pipeline and work together to bring solutions to patients as quickly as possible.
We were talking earlier about how government pulled out all the stops along with business to accelerate pharmaceuticals for COVID-19. Have you seen an indication that this is here to stay, that when it comes to the development of other new pharmaceuticals, that the regulatory process will be made more efficient than it's been in the past in Canada?
It's a great question. And I think that's one where myself and my industry partners are working hard to lobby government, to lobby some of the payer systems, to try and adopt some of these best practices, to find ways that we can get medicines to patients as quickly as possible that can benefit. I think there's hope there, but I think it's going to take some hard work and some real collaboration across many stakeholders for us to get there. Right now, we're not there. But like I said, there's a lot of people who want this to happen, and it's a matter of getting together and working through it.
You've worked both in Canada and abroad, comparing for pre-COVID-19 conditions. If you were looking at the approval process in Canada and comparing it with other major industrialized countries, How did we stack up relative to the US or the UK or Germany or others?
You know, I've got to say that Health Canada does a remarkable job reviewing medicines, you know, in a real quality way, and hitting timelines, and I think keeping us competitive. The challenge isn't necessarily getting a product reviewed in time in Canada, because there is a robust and established process for that, and timelines with metrics. I think the challenge is when it comes down to recognizing the value of the medicine and working with the different payer processes and payer systems in order to get drugs reviewed. I think that's where we do fall short relative to some of the other countries in the world. Some of the other countries, for example, have innovative mechanisms that can recognize early value for innovation sooner than we do here in Canada. I know there's been some steps made where we're trying to get there, and we're trying to have those talks around different frameworks that we can look at to accelerate access. But as we speak right now, we're not there yet.
One final area I want to touch on, and that is looking down the road, maybe 5 years or so. How do you see GSK and Canada developing? And what do you see for the sector itself? How different would it be if we were dealing with a pandemic like COVID-19 5 years from now?
Yeah, that's a great question, Perrin. I would hope we're not in a situation, and then we've transferred these learnings and we've committed them to organizational memory, so that whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, we have a playbook that we can operate with. I know there's been great strides in maintaining local manufacturing, end-to-end manufacturing, and I think that's important to have those capabilities locally. But I think it's also important that we maintain an enriched, innovative biopharmaceutical sector, one that allows great science to thrive and solutions that can come to patients. You know, I didn't mention it earlier, but we've got some of the best investigators across so many different disease areas in the world sitting here in Canada. And the ability to bring some of those clinical studies to life here in Canada, it's something that we should hold on to as well. But ultimately, though, after all the science is realized, we have to bring it home to patients, and that's where we need to make some improvements.
It's a pretty exciting vision of the potential that's there if we are prepared to go out and to seize that potential and to bring it to reality. Faris, thank you for being with us today and for sharing your insights. This is an enormously challenging, but in so many ways, an enormously satisfying time to be in your sector because of the impact in a very positive way that the sector is making in saving lives and in allowing us to look forward to something which is much more normal than we've experienced over the last year and a half. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for sharing your insights today.
It's my pleasure, Perrin, and that's part of our makeup in this industry is to consistently strive to find solutions for patients and bring them to life. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today, and I really appreciate what you're doing with this whole series of talks.
My pleasure.